serious about loving our neighbour, this is the point I'd really like to make. If we're serious about loving our neighbour, being voices for the voiceless, we've got to take seriously that pro-life laws are one of the very most effective ways we can do that. Hello and welcome to this episode of About Abortion. It's a special episode today because we are live at the Teams Conference, that's CBI UK's national nationwide conference, and I'm hosting. And your standard host, David Brennan, is a guest on the show. Also joining us today is Debbie Mountford, our excellent, superb media and research officer for CBI UK, who's going to be helping us deal with some of the technical detail of Roe versus Wade. So, are we dealing with how to cross a lagoon today? No. We're dealing with an American legal case and its implications for UK abortion abolition. So thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Absolutely, yes.
So quickly, Teams Conference, how's it been for you guys?
Just fantastic. I mean, there's just such a great energy to get together as a national team and learn from each other and be with each other and praise the Lord together and learn about how we're working to save the unborn. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's been brilliant, but don't ask me, ask them. That is not the sound of canned laughter, that is actually our live audience at this wonderful podcast today. Perhaps probably the biggest event of the weekend though has to be the fire pit last night. You consuming a tossed marshmallow over a fire.
Yeah, I think it was probably a 4, 5, 6 metre throw.
Third attempt?
Third attempt.
What's the third attempt?
But someone filmed the third attempt and it makes it look like it's the first.
Yeah, don't.
We may be able to use that to finally get some followers for you on social
Yeah,
media.
I know, that'd be great, wouldn't it? I think with a bit of light editing, it could look like I'm doing it whilst walking on the flames as well.
Nice. Okay, so
That
this.
I would share, Dave.
Yeah.
So, finally, some content of Dave worth sharing, which is brilliant. Hopefully you'll share this too, because we believe this Saturday the 24th of June, will be 1 year since Roe versus Wade was overturned. But one of the reasons why we got Debbie is with us today is to help us understand what was this case, why is it so important. So, Debbie, just give us a crash course, because I know this time last year you were speaking to Glenn Scrivener at Speak Life about this, but what was Roe v. Wade? What happened a year ago and why is it so important?
Yeah, so Roe v. Wade was the landmark 1973 ruling which spoke into a largely pro-life landscape in America. 30 states at that point had a near outright ban except to save the life of the mother, and Roe v. Wade overturned that overnight when the Supreme Court voted to allow essentially unrestricted abortion. And the states themselves could not restrict abortion under Roe v. Wade before 24 weeks, before the point of viability, but they were pretty hamstringed in a lot of cases in the third trimester as well. And one of the justices that wrote the majority at the time actually said that they had effectively legalised abortion up to birth in the US. So that was a huge deal, and since then America has been aborting, unfortunately on average, about 1 million babies a year. I think it was 900 and something thousand last year. It has tipped the scales at over 1.2 million. And this time last year what happened was there was a case that came up from Mississippi called the Gestational Age Act, which was being challenged in a case called Dobbs v. Jackson's Women's Health. And what Mississippi wanted to do was restrict abortion after 15 weeks. And they didn't use any other way to try and get around this, as some previous bills, some of the heartbeat bills had done, particularly Texas, had tried to sort of get round Roe a little bit. Mississippi didn't. This was a direct challenge to Roe. And it made its way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court adjudicated that, and in a majority decision, a really amazing landmark majority decision, they decided to allow Mississippi to uphold this 15-week ban, and to do that they had to overturn Roe versus Wade. And what that did, and there's a lot of confusion about this, a lot of people think what that did was make abortion illegal overnight in the United States. It didn't at all. It simply removed that restriction that wouldn't allow the states to regulate on their own based on how their voters wanted to vote. and handed the powers back to the individual state legislatures. So actually, since then, some states have gone the other way and had more liberal abortion laws applied and gone even further in providing. New York, for example, is now providing free medical abortions up to a point. But there are many states that have moved to restrict abortion. So in the last year, we've had 15 states pass restrictions or bans under 12 weeks. There's 8 that are currently working through the courts. But all in all, there's 26 states, 26 out of 50, that want to pass either bans or restrictions before 12 weeks. So that's really significant.
Thank you. Well, that's a really helpful summary. Now, I know lots of people, at the time, the church has not had a single clarion kind of response to Roe v. Wade's overturning last year. And I know there will be some people thinking, oh, golly gosh, this is going to send abortion back underground. Legalizing abortion doesn't stop abortion. What about maternal deaths? All these things. Can you help us get to grips with some of these tricky objections that are going to kind of came out last year and are probably going to resurface, this Friday, Saturday?
Yeah, so I've been actually looking at looking again at some of the media that was coming out last year at the time and what's been coming out since. And the objections I'm just going to look at my notes here, but the objections kind of fall under the kind of camps of, okay, the biggest one that you hear is it's not going to reduce abortion, it's just going to reduce safe abortion. So you're not going to get rid of abortion, women are still going to have them, they're just going to have them illegally. So the total number of abortions is not going to go down, so you're wasting your time.
So what's the response?
The response to that is, it's not true.
Wow, okay.
We knew this before Roe v. Wade was overturned. When we've looked at restrictions that states have managed to pass under Roe in the past, things like waiting periods, you have to see a scan before you can abort, anywhere where there's been financial limitations or time limits, we have seen abortions drop. And we've seen birth rates go up, but not by the same number. And we've seen unintended pregnancies drop as well, and that is within the US. So we know that restricting abortion does reduce abortion, and we know this from other countries as well. We know this from countries that have outlawed abortions through the late 80s and 90s. Countries like Poland and Nicaragua and Chile, we do know that restricting abortion reduces abortion. So we know that's not true. It's quite difficult to get the data, but it's estimated, and actually it's a pro-choice organisation that have done these estimations, and we've kind of looked at their numbers. It's estimated that with the 15 states that have managed to pass bans so far, remember there's still some in the pipeline, we think about 65,000 babies overall have been saved from abortion in the last year since Roe has been passed.
Wow.
And the pro-life organisations in America estimate that if all 26 states are able to get their regulations in place, then we're looking at about 200,000 fewer abortions, and that's net fewer, so that's including women who've gone to other states and had abortions, including states where abortions might go up, but there is a net reduction expected of about 200,000 a year.
Okay, so pause there. So we're saying that even pro-choice people, pro-abortion groups, having crunched the stats themselves, looked at them, are confirming that actually handing abortion back to individual states, those states criminalising abortion again, leads to lower abortion numbers.
Yep.
Already 65,000, but potentially up to 200,000 once all of these.
Yep. This is an organisation called We Count. You can look this up online. They actually did this study 6 months out. So it was about 32,500 at that point, but we had reason to believe it would continue on. If anything, it might actually be more than that, as more states have been able to get through the courts in the last 6 months. So that's even a conservative estimate, and by a pro-choice lobby group. Okay,
wow. Well, Dave, let's bring you in at this point. Obviously, evangelical church is almost allergic to the prospect of laws of any nature. How would you use what's happened with Roe v. Wade, particularly on this point? What's the lessons that the church can learn?
Thank you so much for listening this far into this week's episode of About Abortion. I do hope you're finding these helpful. If you are finding them helpful, can I ask for your help in getting these messages to more of the people who need to hear them? This is the only podcast in the UK addressing the greatest injustice of our time. And we're delighted that these podcasts are delivered free of charge, but they're not free to make. It costs about £300 a month to produce these podcasts. And if we had just 50 people donating around £6 or £7 a month, that would cover our costs. It's about the same cost as an Amazon Prime subscription or a Netflix subscription. Would you consider giving £6 or £7 or £8 a month to help us continue to deliver these messages and to be voices for the voiceless. We'd so appreciate if you could like, share, comment, subscribe, and thanks so much, and we'll let you get back to the show now.
Well, I think building what Debbie said, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that legislation really does work. It makes a difference. It doesn't necessarily solve every problem, but of any single action, if you can put it that way, it's the most impactful. I mean, when's the last time any of us saw 65,000 lives saved because of one thing? It's incredibly impactful. I think that this myth that legislating against abortion won't save lives is clearly false. And so I think we have to see that it does work, and if it works, then the next question is, well, do we take our Bibles seriously? Because we're told to love our neighbour, and the evidence shows us that one of the most effective ways we can love our neighbour is to help to create laws that will protect them from acts of violence. And there is no people group more persecuted on the face of the earth than the unborn child.
Absolutely.
There is no more dangerous place in the world to be than in the womb of your mother. And if we're thinking about focusing our efforts, what's the best thing we can do with our limited resources in terms of justice? And of course, that's not the only calling of the Christian. We are called to evangelize, we're called to plant churches and love our families and all the rest of it. But justice really matters. It's very close to the heart of God. So in terms of justice, in terms of loving our neighbour, why would we not put all of our energies behind a law that can save 65,000 lives when we'll use the very same scriptures to justify wearing face masks and social distancing, things which at best lack any real depth of evidence that they save any lives at all, compared with this, which has just been shown to save 65,000 lives. So the idea, changing the law won't do anything, is clearly false. And so then I think we have to ask, well, why then do people continue to believe that? Is that actually a convenient excuse for not standing up and advocating for these laws? Because culturally, you're going to get some pushback for that. You are inviting persecution, which Jesus tells us to expect. But if we're serious about loving our neighbour, this is the point I'd really like to make. If we're serious about loving our neighbour, being voices for the voiceless, we've got to take seriously that pro-life laws are one of the very most effective ways we can do that.
Brilliant. Okay, so objection 1, out the ballpark. Right. Objection 2. Right.
Objection 2.
What is it?
Objection 2 is a biggie as well, certainly for the other side. This will harm women. That's what we hear all the time. And in fact, I'll just quote some of the news organisations that we're going on about this last year.
So these are kind of headlines last year when this changed.
This is headlines last year. So overturning Roe v. Wade could lead to more women being jailed for miscarriages. Yes, I know. Are they going to be able to search your apps? There are these apps that track menstrual cycles. How far are these states going to go in trying to criminalise every single aspect of women and control reproductive rights? Obviously, they have eliminated a constitutional right to abortion. The court just told us that we are not equal. It's going to criminalise IUDs, criminalise things like IVF and emergency contraception. It's a very dark day in America. I have to say, I think one of my favourites actually came from the ladies from The View. I don't know if you've ever watched The View.
I don't even know what The View is.
He'd be unlikely to admit it on
absolutely.
air if he had.
Absolutely.
Wait, have any of our live audience watched The View?
We've watched The View.
Okay.
We're seeing some sort of reluctant head nods.
Reluctant head nods maybe. But they're saying things like one of the ladies on The View said, there's going to be more poor kids, there's going to be more kids in adoption, there's going to be more kids in foster care, there's going to be more abused kids. Seeming to miss the point that there are going to be more alive children and fewer dead children. And one host said there's no way this is going to reduce abortions, it's just going to reduce safe abortions. We've covered that off. But I think this whole we're driving women underground. Women are going to die from illegal abortions. Women are going to be criminalised for miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies, etc. Some of these are really easy to deal with. So the idea that any woman would be criminalised or prosecuted or not treated for an ectopic pregnancy or a miscarriage is completely false. And you have to look no farther than the bills that are already on the books. Universally, all of them make provision for this, and they make provision very clearly. Some on the other side have argued that because sometimes the same procedure is needed, so if you've had an incomplete miscarriage, for example, you might need a D&C, because it's technically the same procedure, it will be criminalised. Again, the bills make very clear that it's not. It's spelled out in black and white. So a lot of this is just fear-mongering. I think the biggest one that seems to grab people's attention is this idea of illegal abortions and this idea of maternal mortality is going to get worse because women are going to be driven underground to have dangerous back alley abortions. And for a number of reasons, this is completely false. For a start, what's the difference in legalising pills by post and taking these pills at home completely unsupervised, simply after a quick call with the doctor, and getting them from another state and taking them? Why would the risk be any greater? We're not talking about coat hangers in back alleys anymore, and we haven't been for a very, very long time, certainly not in the United States. Indeed, even before Roe versus Wade was passed, a decade before, the then director of Planned Parenthood, the biggest abortion provider in the US, is quoted as saying that abortion is no longer a dangerous procedure, that 90% of all illegal abortions are done by physicians. And when you look at other countries, we see that. Countries that have criminalised abortion, maternal mortality rates have actually improved in these countries. Poland, Nicaragua, Chile. Chile is an excellent example. There was an extensive study in 2012 by an epidemiologist who found that not only did laws that criminalised abortion save children's lives, but actually improved women's health. But within the United States, the sticking point is that they do have a problem with maternal mortality. The United States is not a very good place to be pregnant. Their maternal mortality rate is extremely high, much higher than any country in Europe, and it's been steadily climbing for years now. So the fact that maternal mortality may have gone up a little bit in the last year is simply a continuation of the trend. And the other thing that we're not told about is that there's no obligation at all for abortion facilities or hospitals to report to the Department of Health and Human Services deaths from abortion. They're recorded as hemorrhages, as sepsis, as something else. So they're not comparing like for like, and the media weaponise that, and it's so unfair.
Well, listen, we unfortunately the show has to go on at the Teams conference, so our podcast has to be brought to an end. But I think even in this short time, maybe you're watching this podcast on a lunch break or whatever, we've dealt with two of the major objections to Roe v. Wade. One, that, criminalising something doesn't deal with it. Clearly it does. 65,000 living American children are alive today because of this, just because of the Supreme Court correcting a bad and wicked law. Secondly, does this stuff lead to, maternal death and all of these complications? No, there's no solid evidence to suggest that. So whoever you are, where you're watching this, Roe v. Wade, dare to rejoice. A year after Roe v. Wade, dare to rejoice, dare to praise God for this landmark case, and let's pray that the UK would actually see its, come to its senses and think to itself, gosh, we should reform our own law, which needs massive overhauling to deal with the 215,000 babies we kill each year in the United Kingdom.
Can I throw? Yeah, I want to just throw one thing in, if I may.
Well, you are the host, ultimately.
Yeah, commandeer the chair again. Well, I think it's very important we learn the lessons from Roe v. Wade a year on. What's actually happened? Those claims were clearly false. Let's not fall for the same tricks here in the UK, because the very same lies being brought out right now. The tragic case of Baby Lily last week, pro-abort lobbyists such as Stella Creasy lying on live television, claiming that, fear-mongering about what the law is going to do if we don't change the law, lying about abortion as if it's healthcare. And it's very important we learn the lessons. We pro-lifers can be quite naive, fall for the same tricks again and again. Our passion can be neutralised, our activism kind of sidelined as we believe the lies of the other side. We've got to look at the facts and take authority and press forward with laws that will make a difference.
Amazing. Well, Debbie, David, thanks for joining us, and to our live audience. On the About Abortion podcast, I'll be handing back to your host, and he will see you next week.